Welcome to the Modeling Lifestyle, where we celebrate how modelers have embraced their modeling and friendships as a lifestyle. We discuss how modeling can become a life passion and lead to lifelong friendships. The goal of the modeling lifestyle is to preserve the modeling and interests of leading modelers and the modeling industry. The modeling lifestyle is sponsored by NGMC, who believes that through bringing hobbyists together with both information and modeling, the hobby will grow stronger with more model builders than ever. NGMC, which started as narrow gauge modeling company, is focused in 1/4 inch scale across hobbies. NGMC is a market leader in 1/4 inch scale with a range of products from over 50 vendors. In 2021, NGMC became the largest reseller of out-of-production model paint in North America with over 9,000 bottles in stock. And now to Jim Kello, MMR, host of the Modeling Lifestyle.
I love the sound of a whistle.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We've got one terrific guest for you to meet, and I know that you're going to really enjoy meeting him. Our show, as you know, introduces you to not just great modelers, but people who have made modeling a significant part of their lives. They've made significant contributions to the hobby, and their hobby participation has helped no telling how many other people improve their skills and become better modelers. So thanks so much for all of the viewers who are here tonight with us on YouTube. Please feel free to use the chat function. If you have any questions or comments during the show, please go ahead and put them on the chat. And as soon as I hear about them, I'll incorporate them and ask our guests to answer the questions. And please feel free to do it. This is open, and you're just as much a part of this discussion as anybody else. Tonight, I want you to please meet Colonel Thomas Thiele, who is a fantastic modeler, as you will see. And he's created what I consider to be a true masterpiece of modeling. Before I met Tom, I used to think that I was a fairly decent modeler. But I've learned that I have got so much to learn that I never even knew about after meeting Tom and talking with him, that I consider myself a beginner again. My only reaction when I looked at his model the first time and saw some of the scenes was impressive is an understatement. This is just something to behold. Tom is not only a dedicated historical modeler, he's also a major promoter of historical modeling, especially the history of the Alamo battle. His modeling is recognized worldwide and is an inspiration for so many others in the hobby. So with that said, let me introduce you to Colonel Tom Thiele. Tom, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening.
Tom, real quickly, you need to, at the bottom left, turn your camera on and unmute. On the bottom left of your screen, the two red bars on the microphone and the camera.
So folks, just bear with us a few minutes and we'll be right with you as soon as we can get the technical issue dealt with here.
So Tom, you have to click and start your video down at the bottom right, and you have to click the microphone. It's muted because we can't see or hear you.
Got it. Click on.
There we go. Tom had to call.
Okay, there we go.
Welcome.
Sorry, guys, I'm not really good at this stuff.
But you're no better than I am. I mean, if it wasn't for Phil, we wouldn't have a show here. So, come on, this is something we're all learning with. But the most important part is we try to have a little fun and understand that, we're all volunteers and we're just trying to do the best we can. So don't worry about it. I mean, you haven't seen anything. I'll mess up along the way somewhere. I guarantee it. I do all the time.
I said to you before we started this, I hope I don't screw up. So I started off by screwing up.
Well, what? Okay, so we've gotten that out of our system. So what? So it's going to be uphill from this point on. Don't worry about it. So let me start with this question, Tom. Who is Tom Thiele? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I was born in the Bronx, raised in the Bronx, worked in the Bronx, had a bunch of different jobs. I was, I got drafted, went in the Army, came back out, became a cop for a while. And then I did, I graduated college, went and took college, graduated college, and went off doing other things, working for different companies, worked for a company producing Broadway shows for a number of years. And then about 1990, after I had done the one Alamo piece that was started to be shown in San Antonio with the Alamo, my wife said to me, "You should just do this full time. You like it, you enjoy yourself, do it full time. See if you can make any money at it." So I said, "Well, why not? Give it a shot, And there I am. That's me.
So you've really been a businessman in the hobby since the 90s.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You're the envy of an awful lot of us that would love nothing better than to have that kind of a capability. And some of us thought we did and couldn't make it, but others of us didn't even try. So congratulations. That's great.
Yeah.
So
I did have a lot of luck, though.
Well, that goes with any business. I mean, luck is part of it as far as I'm concerned. How did you get interested in historical modeling in the first place?
Oh, that goes back to the 50s. And I think I told you before when we were talking, in the 50s, Walt Disney had that Fess Parker trilogy. And of course, in the Bronx, every kid wanted to be Davy Crockett. And, at the time, all our parents had come, my father, all my uncles had come back from the war. You hear listening to all the war stories. And in my house, the war stories went back for generations. My grandfather was the head of Sinn Féin Gael in Ireland during the Revolution. I had a grandfather that died at Gettysburg at the Angle. He was with the 69th Irish. So you had a little history and you had a little this and that and the other, enough to keep you interested,
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I guess I just got interested. And, like with my great-great-grandfather, I got a bunch of books over here about him. He was a sharpshooter for the 69th, and he was out on the Emmetsburg Road. And so I went to Gettysburg to see where he had been shot, and he had been shot down by this barn on the Emmetsburg Road. And I found this barn, don't know if it was the right one, but his name was on the monument, and had the star next to it that he'd been killed there.
Okay.
And that's really what got me interested, and Gettysburg did such a great job redoing the battlefield itself. I mean, when I first went there, they had this, there was a gas station next to Lee's headquarters, and there was a hotel on the other side, and it kind of took a lot away from it. And I started, I want to see what it looked like. So one of the models I built for a show was Lee's headquarters and Meade's headquarters at Gettysburg.
Mhm.
And I did a few other models. I had done 5 models of things that had happened at Gettysburg, and I went to a show at what was in there? Valley Forge. Valley Forge had a show, so I went there, and I brought the 5 models with me, and it was a weekend show, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and so I brought them in. I said to them, hey, I rented a table, set the 5 models out on the table, and before the show opened up, I had sold them. So I said, well, this,
It's pretty easy, right?
this is pretty good, So then I came back, and my wife and I would go and we would do Irish festivals up and down the East Coast on a weekend. And I would do the coats of arms on nights.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what your name was, because I had Burke's General Armory. And, you'd tell me your name, I just look it up, boom. And, I could read it. I knew what it meant, the words and also. And if you wanted them on a horse, no big deal. What I used to do is pre-paint the horses with the colors of the bridles and all, pre-paint the knights with the colors. And then all I had to do was the coat of arms. And on the shield. So I would do that all weekend long. And I would do really well. People would order it, and I'd sit there, paint it, and do the next one, sit there, paint it, do the next one. So that turned out pretty good. So we were getting, that was coming in. And then my accountant says to me, hey, I know a guy, he's trying to start this toy business of his. So he says, I want you to get together with him. So I got together with this guy doing a toy business. And that was, he was doing pretty good, and he says, I want to make play sets. I said, well, what kind of play sets do you want to make? So I says, look, if you want to make play sets, you got to make play sets that kids can afford, because I see what they're selling at the shows, they're $100, $150. A kid can't buy that.
Yeah.
So I says, how about we make a play set that a kid can afford, So he says, all right, what can you do? So anyway, I did, I think, what was the first one I did was the Alamo. So I did make the Alamo play set, sold pretty well. The second year I did the Gettysburg play set. Then I did the Revolutionary War. And then I did San Juan Hill. And I did Custer's Last Stand. And I did D-Day. And so every year I was pumping out a play set. And of course, we were actually we were producing them in Hong Kong at the time. So we were buying these containers on the ships to ship them, and then they took off pretty good, and we had to start doing them in French and in Spanish because they were selling in Europe, and so they were selling over there, doing pretty good, and it allowed me time to do other things, and I had already made the diorama, the older diorama of the Alamo in 1/72nd scale, which I had given to the Alamo. I figure I just did it, and I didn't do it for money. I just did it because I wanted to do it, and so I gave it to them. Wound up to be the biggest hit that they ever had. Over 100 million people have seen it. Who knew? But everybody kind of liked it, and I remember one time my wife and we bought a place in San Antonio, and we were down there, and we meet our neighbors. My neighbor come up to me, and he says, oh, if you go to the Alamo, you got to see this. There's a diorama that you got to see. And I says, oh, really, of what? And he says, of the Alamo, you got to see it. It's incredible. And I says, oh, I says, I made that. And he's, yeah, right. No, so he was very surprised when he found out I really did make it.
One of the ones you were telling me about the other night when we were talking was the diorama you made. I think it was for Mitsubishi.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a funny story with that one too, because I had, when I started making money at this thing, I figured, well, I should have a shop. So we had a garage behind the house. Wasn't much of a garage, so I decided I would make it into a shop. And in the shop, I got a little bit more room than I had in the house now, and so I decided to make Crockett's Last Stand. No, I hadn't sold anything yet. It was just, yeah. So now, and here's the funny part. See those walls there? That's all out of plaster of Paris. And boy, it was heavy. And so I'm making this out in the garage that I turned into a shop, and I'm making this thing, and I'm spending a lot of time on it. I'm out there at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And, Nancy comes out to me and she says, "What are you doing? What is this for? Who is this for?" And I says, "I'm going to sell it." She says, "To who?" I said, I don't know yet. So I just went, and I finished it finally. It took me about a year to make, and I finished it, and I was down to San Antonio, and I across the street from the Alamo, there was a place opened up, I forget what they called it, but it was a high-tech place.
The Texas Adventure.
They called it Texas Adventure.
Yeah.
And so I went and I met with the manager in there, and I told him what I had. And what I had done. Well, the one thing I had done, knowing that I wanted it to be high tech, was the cannons fired, the explosions exploded, the rifles, pistols fired, and it was all controlled by a CD. There was music. It was the whole thing. And so he really liked it. And then I had to go to New York City to sit down with the Mitsubishi board from Japan. So they sat down, and I showed them what I had, and they wanted to buy it. So I sold it to them, and that's when that got off the floor. Started with Mitsubishi. So they used that as the way to get people into their place.
Yeah.
Started it off there.
Now, the rifle fire and all of that you recorded, that was really black powder, you said, right?
No. It was fiber optics.
Ah, okay.
Well, everything was fiber optics. And I didn't know how to use fiber optics. I learned that on my own. I would slice the fiber optic at a real low angle, to get the look I wanted from the end of a rifle. Or I'd glue some together and bring it down the barrel to see what I could do with it. It was all trial and error. It was like I told you, in the Bronx as kids, you learn to improvise. If you need something, learn how to do it. And
this was back what, 80s, 90s, early 90s?
This was back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And,
I don't think many modelers that I know, I've never heard anybody using the technology back then.
No, but one of the things that I had done in the past was work for the phone company. And so I knew a little bit about fiber optics, just a little bit, not much. And I only knew it used for communications at that point. But when you could put a light through something that small, and then at the other end, of course, if you cut it off at a 90-degree angle, you've only got a small tip of light, but you can actually cut that at an angle and get a little sharper. It'll come out like this. Mm-hmm. So things like that, you just work with them until you get it just right. And then, like with the cannon fire and the explosions, like the explosions, I do separate groups, so that you'd actually see the explosion get bigger, and the groups would be separated only by a fraction of a second. So when you saw the cannon fire, you'd see the explosion, but it'd be, you know, it looked a little bit more realistic.
I bet that was something. Well, so
Yeah.
all of this, you know, you're in business now. You're obviously successful. You're selling your products, no problem whatsoever. You're in demand. So then you come along and you decide, well, I'm going to do the Battle of Alamo.
Yeah. Well,
This was going to be something that wasn't just an ordinary diorama. This was going to be something really special.
yeah. You know, through the years, I guess the 90s, I had done other things. I made dioramas for different museums, and some I really thought were beautiful. You know, I did a square of British Black Watch Highlanders against the George and Napoleon's cavalry at Waterloo. I had done Revolutionary War dioramas. I remember from one school teacher, he was a high school principal in, I think it was Union, New Jersey. No, it wasn't Union, but he said he wanted to get his kids interested in history. So he wanted me to do his face on the uniform of a soldier in every war we'd been in. So I did his face on. I started off with the French and Indian War, and then I went to the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812 and the Texas American War. No, the Alamo. Had to put that in there.
Yeah.
Then the Texas American War, then the Civil War, then the Indian Wars, then the Spanish American War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, whatever. And I did it like this, you know. Well, I did things like that. I was doing anything that anybody wanted. All you had to do was ask me, and I would figure out a way to do it. That was the fun of this.
I understand. Well, listen, what drew you to the Alamo? Why is it historically important?
The story itself, you know, was the heroism of these 189 men. There were probably more than that, probably up to about 250, but let's say it's 189. And you go back there and you learn about the defenders themselves. You know, I mean, Crockett was one of the oldest guys there. He's 49 years old. Bowie was only 39. Travis, the commander, was 27. You had three brothers, the Thiele brothers. They were like 17, 18, 19 years old. You had, and they were cotton pickers. You had the entire town of Gonzales, you know, the shoemaker, the sheriff, the guy who ran the grocery store, you know, 30 guys. They just showed up. I mean, these weren't soldiers. They were men protecting their family. Santa Anna had come up, you know, through Texas, and he was destroying everything. He was just leaving everything behind him in waste, killing everybody and moving forward. And they made a decision that it was time that this stopped, you know, and somebody had to stop this guy. And they knew Houston was trying to build an army, and he couldn't leave a fort along his lines of communication. And the Alamo wasn't a fort, but it was the best thing that they could find to look like a fort. And they did have artillery. You know, more than anything, they had artillery, which was good for that time. They had more artillery than any place west of the Mississippi.
Jeez.
And they had some good artillery too. So these guys made a decision, you know, like, okay, we'll defend this place. Now, at some point, they realized they weren't going to get reinforced. You know, Fannin was in Goliad with about 400 men, and Fannin didn't know whether to burn or go blind. You know what I'm talking about. He was a lousy commander.
Mhm.
And by the time he finally decided to move, it was too late, and he got caught in the open by Uriah's troops, and then they were brought back, and on well, I think it was Palm Sunday, they were all slaughtered. They were literally just shot down. So all those men were lost. Now at the Alamo, so you got this 187 men. Now they don't. Nobody knows whether the line happened or it didn't happen. Although, you have your revisionist historians that'll go and say that never happened. People don't do that stuff. But unfortunately, if you look into history, it did happen a lot. A lot of times, if they made a line and said, okay, if you want to stay, let's cross the line. If you don't, stay over. And the story goes that Travis drew a line, told the men the situation, and it all but one crossed the line. And his name was Moses Rose. Now, afterwards, if you check Moses Rose, they found his grave in Texas. So he was a real man. He did live there. He was part of Napoleon's army originally. He was at the Alamo. And then he lived afterwards. So that kind of fits the story too, that he's the only man that left.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he drew the line, and all the men crossed it. And at that point, they all knew that they were going to die. That was it. This is what they were going to stand for. And that, to me, that's true heroism. I mean, you got your family back here, you got your wives and your kids, and everybody else is behind you, and you're standing here looking at an army, a professional army. And you're not a professional army, and you're just kids with rifles. Most of them were in their 20s, teens. I mean, they had John King, who was 15 years old. They had Galba Fuqua, his friend, I think, was 16. You had Anthony, who's two kids, 10 and 12 years old. They had a lot of young kids and old men. You had one old man. But for the most part, they had a lot to lose. They were young men, in their 20s for the most part, some in their 30s. And they were willing to lose it. And if you go back then, I remember one story, and I really read everything. If there was anything to read about this battle, I read about it. And I remember reading one night a contemporary account of a woman there that, Crockett, the night before the final battle, had walked into the chapel and knelt down on his knees and prayed. And you have to understand that a lot of these guys back then were very religious, unlike today. And when they made up their minds, they made up their minds. There was, something they had that we no longer have today. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but so I'll leave that at that. But they were also the first group of trans-Appalachian frontiersmen to come over those mountains into the West. And you didn't do that without being tough. They were shooting with a squirrel rifle to get dinner for the evening.
Yeah.
So their rifles were good for 300 yards. The Mexicans had the British Brown Bess and the Baker rifle. They were good for maybe 75 yards. So for 200 yards, the Alamo rifles were on their own. And then you had the conflict for the last 100 yards. In addition, the Alamo cannon, well, for the most part, they had no cannonballs. Some of the cannons had them, but most of them didn't. So they were chopping up horseshoes and scrap iron and glass and anything that could ram down the barrel. And believe me, a giant shotgun is what they turned out to be. A huge, and that's even worse than a single cannonball coming out. When they blast out all of this iron and glass and, just, you can imagine getting hit by that.
Yeah.
when at the first blast from the northern wall, when what's his name? Let's see. Give me a break here for a second.
Yeah.
Colonel Duque was coming from the north, and he had 320 troops. He was coming directly at the north wall with 320 troops. They opened fire, and the first blast killed 40 men, took 40 men down. One blast, boom, 40 men. That's tough to handle. And when the other guys see that, there's a bit of hesitation at that point. And they had 2 9-pounders and a 6-pounder up there on a high point. And then the rifles started in. And then they reloaded and fired again. Well, now the Mexicans know they're in for it. These guys are not going to run, and they're not, they're going to fight. So the story got me into it. So.
It's funny, but as I sit here and listen to you, you were there.
Yeah, I tried to be.
You sound like you live this, not studied it. You sound like you live this. This is extremely important to you. The heroism of these people really got hold of you, it seems to me. I think the story of 189 men drawing a line in the sand and said, this is where we are, come and get us, that really rang a bell in your heart. And to me, more than anything else, that drew you to this battle. That drew you to the Alamo, but more than anything else. And as you sit here tonight, you sound like you lived every second of it.
Yeah. I couldn't get enough. I couldn't read enough about it. I couldn't find enough to read about it. Every book that came out, I bought. Anybody who did research and wrote a book, I bought the book.
All right. So this really struck you. I mean, This really grabbed you. So you decided, okay, I'm going to build a diorama about this battle.
Yeah. Well, actually,
what on earth drew you to build it to the magnificent size that it is, with all of the great detail that you put in it? I mean, there's no telling how long this must have taken you to complete.
Long time. Actually, there's a funny story on that. In 1964, I made my first visit to San Antonio. And I went there, and I went into the Alamo, and they had a little diorama that an 8-year-old kid had made and given them. And I was so impressed. It was made out of cardboard. And if you remember back then, he had cowboys and Indians and soldiers and all sorts of different colored, everything was a different color. They were all in the inside fighting, and this was his Alamo diorama, and he gave it to the Alamo. And I was just taken aback. What a great little thing this is, And I was studying at the time. There was an outfit called the Telephone Pioneers of America, and I worked for the telephone company back then. And I had joined, and they had hired a guy from the Smithsonian Institute who was teaching us artwork. You could do paintings. So after work, one night a week, we would go to a certain room in the telephone building, and he would teach us how to paint. So when I first went there, my idea was to paint the Battle of the Alamo. But after I saw what this kid had done, painting went out the window, and I was going to do a diorama. That's the first diorama that I did. Now, after I did the first diorama, believe it or not, and I didn't know this at the time, but there's a lot of Alamo guys out there. And the criticism came in bunches. You did this wrong. You did that wrong. You did this wrong. You did that wrong. it just got to a point after a while, and I said, because I had worked with Charlie Long, who ran the museum at the time. Charlie was an old man. He's passed away a long time ago.
Now, this is the Alamo Museum, right?
Yeah, in the Alamo Museum. And I would take pictures of what I was doing, and I would show them to Charlie and say, well, Charlie, what do you think of this? Should I change this? Should I change that? Because at the time, I only had 3 books and 2 pictures. That was it. And, you look what I got behind me now.
Yeah.
It's 3 books and 2 pictures. I had The Alamo by John Myers Myers, A Time to Stand by Walter Lord, and 13 Days to Glory by Lon Tinkle. That was it. And that's how I made the diorama, and everything I did was wrong. So that was the start of me thinking about this big diorama. Then I made Crockett's Last Stand, of course, during the 90s for Mitsubishi, but that was only a small portion. And it was 54 millimeter. And even a small portion in 54 millimeter is rather large.
Yeah.
Well, we had and there was where I was living, there was no way I could do anything like this. But previously, we decided that we had a little extra money now, and so I bought 50 acres or so, and we came out, and one day we had a house here, and I got my daughter and my son to give me a hand, and in fact, my son helped me with the foundations and the wood, the posts and all, and we started building a barn. And then one day we were cutting down hemlock trees and running them through the saw and nailing them up, and the water was coming out as we were nailing, putting the nails in. We were doing board and batten on the outside.
Yeah.
So, but I made a 30 by 40, 30 by 40? Yeah, 30 by 40 barn. And then my son made a nice platform for me on the inside. And the way we had done that, my wife, Nancy, she had figured out on the computer the size that I needed. Because, for instance, the west wall alone had to be 16 feet long. But, yeah, so this wall was 16 feet. But then you figure on the other, this is Carl Chow, by the way, he's the director of the Hall of State.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, everything that had to be included, and we had to turn it at an angle, because if I turn it straight ahead.
Wait a minute, let me go back.
Yeah.
Whose estate? He's
the Hall of State. Texas Hall of State.
Texas Hall of State. Gotcha. Okay.
So
that's the museum that the model is in. Is that right?
Yes. It's in the Texas Hall of State.
Got it. Okay.
Over here, if you see the wall comes at an angle, and that's deliberate. I had to figure out, with the size of the compound itself, it couldn't be straight up, because you would have no room for the Mexican movement on the outside. It had to be at an angle. So if it was at the angle, it couldn't be at too much of an angle, because down at the southern end of that wall, I had Morales and his troops coming around the Charlie house from and avoiding the lunette. So I had to have enough room on the outside for that. And you had to have enough room on the outside for Romero's attack over on the east side. So all this had to be done on a piece of paper. My wife did that. She's really great with a computer, and she figures out these things that I can't figure out. So anyway, we got it. And then,
So if the one side is 16 feet, how long is the other wall, the side wall?
Oh, this piece here is 150 feet long. This piece here is 191 feet long. This piece here, you don't see it in this picture, but I could lay down with my feet sticking up at this wall, and my head wouldn't come to the end.
Okay,
All right, it's a big building.
yeah.
And then beyond that, you've got the low wall and the kitchen, and then you've got the low barracks, and outside the low barracks, you've got the lunette, which
And this is a sizable room we're talking about, and it looks to me from the photo that there's probably enough space for a single file group of visitors to walk around the model.
yeah, it pretty much takes up the whole room.
Yeah. That's gorgeous. I mean, it's unbelievable that you can create something as detailed as this model is, but it's that large. I mean, the amount of detail that I've seen in this model is just it's stunning, I think. How would you describe the overall diorama that you built? What do you really want people to come away and say about the diorama? How
I'd like people to come away after looking at that diorama and say, I think I got a pretty good idea of what the Alamo looked like. You
and
know,
what at some point on that day, what the battle may look like.
yeah. Yeah, because if you see a movie, you know, you look at John Wayne's movie, you've got I think he had something like 75 men on his position at the stockade wall, you know, south of the Alamo. That would have been half the defenders.
Yeah.
There's no way it looked like that. You know, actually he had 13 men to defend that entire position. As far as riflemen went, after the cannoneers were taken out, you know, you have each cannon took a specific number of men to operate, and even operating the cannon at really a low number of men. There would be men doing double duty, you know. So say you could get away with 4 guys operating a 9-pounder, which is hard to believe. It's almost impossible to believe that 4 guys could operate a 9-pounder. But I mean, even if you got to that point and you manned all the cannons in the fort, what you had left over, you could put a rifleman every 40 yards. That's not a lot of riflemen. You know, any movie you see, they're all shoulder to shoulder riflemen or anything else, you know. So they basically, not 40 yards, 40 feet, every 40 feet.
Yeah.
Here's my man.
Let's start talking about the actual development of your diorama. Was this a one-man effort? Did you have a team? How did you approach this?
Well, I was going to build it. You know, I'm the builder. I did that, but I couldn't have done it without help. Rick Range, Craig Kovner, and a number of others. You know, Ed Dabrowski, Bill Chamerker, who else? Members of the Alamo Society. They all pitched in and gave me a hand, whatever I needed. You know, a lot of them did research left and right. And I guess the research really is Rick Range and Craig Kovner. And I can't believe they did as much as they did. They really dug things up. I remember when I was putting in the ditch work, Rick was down in San Antonio with ground penetrating radar over on Houston Street and going back and forth to find how big the ditches were. You know, how deep the ditch was and how far it went, you know. And then they were out in front of the chapel and the long barracks, and they were checking, going up and down with the ground penetrating radar. It was a great help to know all this stuff, but it takes time. It takes days of work to do stuff like this. I had a thing with the back of the chapel had 3 cannons, 3 4-pounders, I believe. And they were on, you see the 3 cannons there, 2 brass and an iron. And they were on Mexican carriages. Well, everybody said that they were on field carriages, and I said, no, I don't think so. And they said, no, you can. I said, there's not enough room for those 3 cannons to fire at the same time. And so, lo and behold, they got 3 cannons, loaded them up on an 18-wheeler, went to an artillery range, marked it out, and those 3 cannons that they brought could fire in that distance. And they came back, they showed me the pictures, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, yeah, great work, guys. He used 1876 field cannons, which has a 6-foot span instead of a old Mexican carriage with a 9-foot span. And I said, so they argued with me. And my thing was there were 2 swivel carriages and a garrison carriage would have done it. And after the battle, in the when they were checking over what was left, they found 3 swivel carriages. And on the north wall, I had the same problem with them. They said to me, two Spanish garrison, 2 Spanish field carriages. And I said, no way. So I put the 16-pounder on a swivel carriage, and it works. If you have a swivel carriage with the garrison, with the field carriage, they work in that corner. There's enough room for both of them to work.
It sounds like a lot of your research was really, let's go back to the source. Let's go and see the place. Let's go to the specific museum and see what they have. And that seems to have been really the motivation behind a lot of the research.
Well, because they say a lot of things, but the picture you've got up there right now, the back of the chapel, and you can see these are Mexican field carriages here, and you can see how wide they are. Now, if you have one firing north, one firing south, and one firing east, when you fire those guns, they're going to recoil into each other. There's no way you're going to stop it. They're powerful guns. They're going to have recoil. Now, I gave in on this to them, but I didn't give in on the northwest corner, but I gave in on this, and I still think I'm correct. It should be a garrison carriage here and 2 swivel carriages north and south. That's my opinion. But my researchers said no, so I went with them.
Sometimes you have to keep the team happy.
Yeah, sometimes you do, even when they're wrong. And I know they're wrong. I know they're wrong. I know they're saying right now, you shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have said that. We're not wrong. We're right.
Well, the development of the plan, when you started out and you decided how big it had to be and what you wanted to include and everything, you had to have a specific plan in mind, I would assume. At some point, you had to decide, I want to include this, I'm going to leave this out, I want to include that, I'll leave that out, in order to try to get something that was manageable.
No, my idea was to include everything that I found, everything. I was going to leave nothing out.
So this, as far as you're concerned, this is a replica of the actual battle for the Alamo.
No, this is the first one I did, and everything in there is wrong.
Okay. But the one that you did last, the one that's in the State Museum, that one, as far as you're concerned, that's what the Battle of the Alamo looked like.
Pretty much. Now, I imagine in years to come, they'll dig up some information and find out, well, I don't know, maybe this wall was lower or this wall was higher, but this is the best. And boy, I'll tell you, we tried. We did everything. We went from the ground up. And we used ground penetrating radar to find it. I remember even in the lunette, when we found the wooden stakes, where were they and how were they placed? Because I couldn't find a picture of a lunette in the 1830s, but I did find a photograph of a lunette taken in the 1840s during the Mexican-American War. And that gave me pretty much an idea how the Mexicans made a lunette. And basically, you know, it was to stop a bouncing cannonball from hitting the low part of the wall or the gate. And you would have a ditch in front, which would stop, you know, an infantryman from.
Yeah.
And then what we did was, and to show you how we went to, and you can't see it on this thing here, but, or maybe you can. On the southern wall where the lunette is, there's a pile of dirt up against the wall. It comes up to where the windows were, covers the doors about halfway up. Well, we had to figure out if you dug a ditch 5 feet deep, 5 to 6 feet wide, and it went from here all around here and down and across, and it didn't go into Crockett's position very much. It stopped. How much dirt would you have? And then you had to add 10% because when you dig it up, you put the air in the dirt. Of course, you get a larger volume. Okay, if you have this, then what would be the embankment against the wall? And how much would you have to make the actual lunette width? If you were going to put the height of lunette in there, that the cannon would have to be able to fire over. So then you had to figure out the height, the lowest height of the cannon barrel for the top of the lunette, which was here. And then you have these here stakes in the ground, and then with your horizontal holding the dirt, and it's back here too. And so you filled up your dirt there, and then against this wall back here, you had this embankment of dirt.
Unbelievable.
I'm
Unbelievable.
sorry, I was looking at something. But you had an embankment of dirt there. So we had to figure out how much dirt we had and how much we could do. It's just like when I did the north wall. Now the north wall, I had to build, rip apart, build, rip apart, build, because people would come up with new information. Originally, the trench up there was 5 feet deep, and you had an embankment of dirt going up. And we found out, no, that's not the case. They used 9-inch logs, and behind that in horizontal were 6-inch logs, and then that was built out 2 feet from the wall, and that was filled in with dirt. And the dirt, where they dug it out, that was 2 feet deep, and that ran around in front of the wall, and that dirt that they dug out was used to fill the space in between those logs. And it works. I mean, if you figure out how much dirt they got out and how much they had, needed to fill that space, it works out. But I had to change the whole thing then, because I had a 5 foot deep trench, and I had to make it into a 2 foot deep trench, and I had a 45. And now all the figures too. I mean, all the figures I had there climbing up this stuff. No, this is the north wall. Yeah, north wall. Yeah. So think about, you didn't have the wood there. You had a pile of dirt coming out at a 45-degree angle. Well, that's not the way it was. This is the way it was.
Let me ask you this.
There you go.
You told me the other day when we talked. Here it is. 2008?
Yeah.
And you had it finished in your mind. Okay, it's done. I finished it. And then new information comes flooding in.
And it came flooding in.
And you tore it up and started from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, that hurt. But I had to. So much new information came in. I mean, the first part started with the north wall. I had to replace the north wall again, which went from the northern end of the long barracks all the way up and over, was all different. So I had to take that all out. Now, then the information came in on the west wall. Northern Castaneda house, the Trevino house, all had to be changed. Then the wall from the Trevino house to the low barracks, it went from 12 feet to 7 feet. And the Lasoya house was no longer there. So that all had to be changed. This here, the center of the center door here went straight through this building to the major courtyard. So you had you could go through there with a man on a horse. Everything changed. And so it was easier for me to just scrap everything and start all over again than it was to try to fix this stuff.
That must have been a heartbreaker.
It was, yeah, it was. But I was determined.
Yeah, but it also goes to how much you relied on the research and how accurate you tried to make the whole scene be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it had to be. I remember. I have a book here. I believe this is it. No. Anyway, I have a book here that one of the guys was going to San Antonio, and another guy had just written a book, and I said to Tony, I give him some money, and I says, pick me up a copy of that book and have him sign it for me. So Tony went and got me the book, and he brought it back when he came back, and he handed it to me, and he says, "Where do you see what he signed?" So I opened up the book, and on the first page, he signed his name. And he said, next time you make something, try to do it accurate. And I thought, what a thing to say. So I wasn't going to go through that again. But I know Alamo people can be very critical, and you just learn to put up with it. When I brought this down to the Hall of State, one of the guys from the Dallas Historical Society was an old man, and he came in on a wheelchair, and most of the men had come in, and they were, they really enjoying themselves, looking around it, asking me things, and he came in and he said, "Well, I don't think you got the color right." Somebody shoot me. You just can't do it for everybody.
No, I'd say that sounds like the kind of hobby mine is.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, one of the things that's striking to me is the number of people, the number of figures that you have.
Yeah.
And when we were talking the other day, my guess is that probably 90% plus of those you made by hand, or you sculpted by hand.
Yes.
To try to get the right pose or the right movement or the right sense of movement from the individual figure.
I thought I'd put it out here. I did use other manufacturers when I started making this. The first time I made the first figure, and I timed it. And, from the time you pour the metal, or you take the legs and the arms and the body and the head and the rifle and the equipment, and you put it all together, and then you prime it and you paint it and you finish it off. You got about 3 hours work into a figure.
Yeah.
And then you sit there and you say, okay, now I got to continue and do this 2,000 more times. And you say, well, okay, 2,000 times 3 hours, 6,000 hours, you know. Actually, to do this, I started and I made 3,260 figures. Because when I made the changes, a lot of times, you know, if you've got a guy scrambling up a 45-degree angle of dirt, you can't use the same figure to scramble up a ladder.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you got a guy firing from a 12-foot wall down, you can't use the same figure to fire from a 7-foot wall. His rifle's at a different angle, and you can't just bend the rifle. So a lot of those, you know, you just push to the side and you remake a new one. And 3,260 is what I made. So that's probably 1,260 more than I needed.
How do you, let me ask you one question. I'm really curious about this. When you paint your figures, what do you paint first?
Usually the uniform itself, the background for the uniform. Like on this figure here, I'd paint the coat blue and I'd paint the pants the off white, and then I'd paint the stripes white. I do the black cap, the black pouch, the black bayonet holder, the black boots. The rifles I all did separately. You just, you know, do whatever happens here.
And in addition to the figures, you had the horses, you had so many other details. The cannon. It's just it's amazing to me the amount of detail in addition to the figures and the walls and, you know, all that.
You can, like the smoke from the cannon barrel at this window, you know that there's a cannon there. You can see the smoke on the walls.
Right. And that to me is just outstanding modeling. I mean, the creativity that brought forth out of you, I mean, that's just magnificent modeling.
Thank you.
What about the authentic painting of the figures? I imagine an awful lot of research had to go into that.
Oh yeah. Well, that's where the reenactors came in. And the reenactors, they're the guys who know what people looked like. And I read to you before the name of the group from how do I do with it now? Oh yeah, like for the Mexicans, when I was creating the Mexican Assault Force, Martin Vasquez, Charlie Lara, and members of El Primo Battalion de Mexico, Rudy Elizondo, Jim Silvers, Gus Martinez, Philip de la Pena, Phil Grissom, and Wayne Vick provided uniform information, and I was also shown original uniforms and equipment at the Hispanic Heritage Center by Erica Arredondo Haskins. So I went to the source to find out what did it look like. And then tell you a funny story about that. The San Luis Battalion, I had painted them all in their dress uniforms. They went into battle in their dress uniforms. So I have them all done now. That 1,500 figures are all painted, ready to go. And I get a call from Rick Range. Santa Ana had taken the uniforms away from the San Luis Battalion a few days before and gave them to the Toluca Battalion. And they had to go in their fatigue outfit. It was white. And so I had to repaint a whole battalion. But you know, the guys were true to their word. They never stopped. If they found something that had to be changed, they called me.
Well, that's why you're so proud of it, though. Let's face it. I mean, all of that extra work, all of that research, that's what makes this so outstanding. No question about it. Yeah. The other details that you added, though, I mean, there's just a fantastic amount of that. I mean, when the way that you created these scenes, I mean, these didn't come from books. I mean, this had to be partly based on historical facts somehow.
Yeah. Well, you know what I got to look at were contemporary paintings and drawings of the time. You can see on the picture on the left, if you look down in the lower left corner, you see the cannon barrel with the strap over it, strapped to the powder. So that you, instead of loading two, you just load the one unit to fire. The powder's already mounted in the shell.
Yeah.
Do you see that there? It's got an X on top of the, yes, right there. You just had it. Yeah, there, right there. And the shells were like that. It made things a little quicker. And not all of them were like that, but just some of them. And then, the other things that were there, you'd have ramrods and everything, different barrels. You always saw a light because they used that to get to light the oh God, I can't think of the word. What they used to light the fuse.
Okay. It'll come. Don't worry about it. One of the stories that you told me I thought was really funny is you had to hire a cowboy to show you how to hitch up.
Oh yeah. Cy Bellamy.
But
I had no idea. I said, I got all these horses here. They had to be tied up somehow, and they didn't have fencing. So how do you tie up these horses? There's got to be some way to do it. Well, Cy was a cowboy. He grew up in West Texas. And basically, until he was 40 years old, he had spent his life on a horse. But unfortunately, he was also doing rodeo work and got a bad back from doing busting broncos and stuff. So, but he showed me how to tie up using a rope to tie up the horse. And so that's how they're tied up.
Well, that goes back to the amount of work, though, and effort that you put into research and to making sure that the details all hold true. I mean, that to me is just outstanding modeling, no question about it. What aspect of this modeling do you find the most interesting? I mean, of all that you do and the research and then there's actually modeling itself, what do you really enjoy the most?
I really enjoy every bit of it. I enjoy researching it. I enjoy building it. I enjoy making it, which is one of the reasons my wife said, why don't you do this for a living instead of doing what you're doing?
There you go. There you go. I understand what you're saying. I mean, I totally agree with you. I understand that.
And it took us, I was so much happier after that. I guess I'm a real grouchy guy or something.
Well, you're doing what you love, that's part of life. What was your goal when you started this project? What did you hope to accomplish?
I hope to make something that would stand for a lot of years and that people would be able to look at and come away with knowledge. They could, instead of reading a book or going and watching a movie, they'd be able to come and look at this and say, well, wow, that's really what it looked like. They'd look at this artillery shed here, which, you won't see anywhere. Nobody makes it, but it was there. And that artillery shed, for instance, the right wall would have been the exterior wall of the first Serra of the three Serras that were here. So that would have been made out of stone. The left wall would have been made out of gray adobe. The front part had been blown down and was used, if you can look there, it's wood, and that was used with plaster. And there was a doorway there, which also had wood and plaster, and there's a door put in here and stone on the right-hand side. And there's a shingled roof. Now, for that, we found the sales slips for the shingles that they bought to do the roofing on this and the Trevino house. So we were pretty much able to put that together and put it to bed. Now this here outside the cavalry, there were probably 5 or 6 guys that took off. You can't see, there's no picture of the rest of them there.
Yeah.
But there's another 100 or so cavalry out here. The Presidial Lancers are here, coming in. But this shows you what would have happened for anybody trying to escape, And I imagine, if you're out in the Lunette and you're being overrun by Morales's troops, you're standing there and somebody's going to run you through with a bayonet. Well, you take your chance. You go over the mound of dirt and you run south. You run east, rather. Well, they didn't make it. There is one report of the guy down here in the lower left, an Alamo defender with a shotgun who blew a corporal off a horse. You can see him just up here in the lower left-hand corner. That he's shooting the corporal off the horse. So there is accurate. I tried to do every story that I knew of in the Alamo. I tried to recreate in this diorama. If I knew about this here is the interior of the center gun position on the north wall. And it had to be a mess over there.
Tom, how long did the battle last, do you think?
Well, they say the full battle was 13 days, but actually the final battle lasted about 90 minutes total.
Total.
From the time they blew the bugle and fired the rockets till every last man was dead and they were just piling them up to burn them. 90 minutes.
Jeez.
At the most. It was a slaughter.
The goal that you set for yourself when you started out, do you feel that you accomplished that?
I think so, yeah.
Gotcha.
I wanted to show the heroism of these guys.
That's got to be a great feeling. I mean, that really does. I mean, you look at that and the amount of detail, the amount of research, the amount of time, the thoughts that went into the placement of all of those people and everything to make sure that it was as accurate as you could make it. Phenomenal work, just unbelievable.
Thank you. I tried to get that in there. I also put in my 3 favorite Davy Crockett's. So.
Well, is the museum, the state museum that houses this, was this the only museum that you looked at to have this house?
No. Actually, in the beginning, I wanted it to go to the Alamo.
Okay.
They couldn't fit it. The library in the back has columns that come down, and physically, it just wouldn't work.
Right.
And they weren't going to build anything new. So the Alamo couldn't do it. And then I figured, well, as long as if I can get it in San Antonio, and I checked out San Antonio and ran into the same problem. It was too big. Nobody could handle it.
So the state really was really the only alternative at the end of the day.
Yeah, actually, it wasn't the only alternative. There were other alternatives that I was looking at, but when I started talking to the state and they showed me what they had, I was really impressed.
Mm-hmm.
And, then they told me, everything is free. They're open every day and it's free, which is one of the things that I wanted. And, they have the state fair there where they get, I don't know, 3 million people at the state fair. That's a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And, I went and I looked at it and looked at everything they had. When I went there, I was so, one of the first books I had, Lon Tinkle or I think it was him. It had a photograph in it of an Alamo diorama given to the Dallas Historic Society, and it was a very small diorama, but it was made out of figures that were about 6 inches high, and it was carved out of wood. Some guy just carved the figures out of wood,
Yeah.
painted them. And I had seen that back in the 1950s. And I said, wow, that's really cool. I really like this. It was one of the things that got me into diorama making. Well, I go into their basement up there in the Dallas Historical Society. I go downstairs in the basement and I'm walking down this long corridor and I look to my right, and here, packed away with a bunch of other stuff, is that diorama. And I says, you got to be kidding me. And I told him the story. I saw this thing in 55 and here it is sitting here.
Yeah.
But then Nancy and I were there and they showed me Fannon's watch. Now, Fannon, when he was shot at Goliad, they had him sitting in a chair and he gave his watch to the lieutenant in charge of the firing squad. And he said, please don't shoot me in the face and see that my family gets this watch. And so he put the watch in his pocket and shot him in the face. That was a bad deal. So anyway, they had the watch and I'm holding it in my hand and I open it up and it says to James W. Fannin, my grandson, from your grandfather on the occasion of your birthday.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool, and that's a relic that should be seen by the public.
Yep.
But it had not been seen since 1836. Then I'm saying all the rest of this stuff they got. They got the flags. They got the uniforms. It was the first time in my life that I held an original squirrel gun. And I couldn't receive, an octagon barrel, the same size barrel that you would have on a regular hunting rifle, but the firing hole was like the size of a .22. It was very small, and it literally was a squirrel gun. It fired a small projectile.
Yeah.
I had never seen one in real life before, but they had one. And they had shotguns. They had Crockett's pistol, his Crockett's Possibles bag, and some other stuff, and I were looking at all of that. They had papers written by Jim Bowie, slave papers, originals signed by him, selling slaves. They had, the original uniform for the cavalry of Dolores. It was really, they dress nice. And you got to figure they were coming up against the Alamo. The Alamo had a saying, boy, they sure got us outdressed.
Yeah.
They were a really fancy army. They had bought their uniforms from Napoleon. And, they got the brown vest from England, from the British brown vest, probably the Baker rifle too. So this stuff was all really nice stuff, and they were professional. They had been putting down risings all over the country for 2 years. It wasn't like they weren't used to battle. They were. So you have to think of all that stuff when you put it together. Will they hold it? Will they hold it together in form? When like in the lower at that northern one that you like, the northern picture, it really goes out a lot further, and the Zapadoras are coming in at an angle and there's two columns of zapadores coming in at an angle. There's a lot of zapadores, and but they stayed in column even under fire. They stayed in column because these were men used to war, and that's the way they fought.
Yeah.
Santa Anna called himself the Napoleon of the West, so he loved using Napoleonic tactics. And then you had Koss, with his right oblique, going around to the northern end of the west wall. He was supposed to originally attack the northern corner of the north wall, but he was taking fire from the battalion brought in by what's his name? Let me see, what is this? Duke. Just in case you're interested, General Koss, when they attacked the Alamo, General Koss attacked with 380 troops from the northwest. Colonel Duque, 320 troops from the north. Colonel Romero, 310 troops from the northeast. Colonel Morales, 126 troops from the south. And then you had 400 of the reserve troops that came in from the northeast. And that's a lot of troops.
Yeah, 1,800 troops.
Yeah, 1,536 assault infantry.
Jeez. Against 189.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't stand much of a chance, when you think of those numbers.
Well, and the people there, that 189 people, as you say, they knew the numbers. They had to know the numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Or have a rough idea, at least.
And that wasn't all that Santa Anna had. He had more troops than that. This is what he put up against them.
Yeah.
That didn't count as artillery. Oh, and in the south, you had 600 of the cavalry covering the south wall in case anybody tried to escape.
Yeah. What are the plans the museum has for your diorama? Tom, do you know?
Well, yeah, they plan to keep it on permanent display.
How many people do you think have seen it so far?
I have no idea. I hope a lot.
Well, I would think so.
You see the rifles? See the rifles there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you make those? Did you buy them? What are those kits? Or
No, actually, I got them from Bill and Helen Emery.
They sell them?
Excuse me?
They sell them?
Well, yeah, they're not open anymore.
Okay.
Bill got Alzheimer's disease and he passed away. And Helen, something happened with Helen, and she, I don't know if she's still alive or what happened to her, but I know it's the Emery Riesling is gone now.
Yeah.
But they were a small store that they supplied very, very good castings.
Yeah. This 54 millimeter, that's, you told me the other day, that's normal the size for a museum, right? That's what they would have the models in.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. I did not know that.
That picture before that, this one, if you go back a second, see this woman here?
Yeah.
No one has admitted that woman there. No one had admitted until I put her in the Crockett's Last Stand. Yes, Crockett's Last Stand. Everybody wanted to know who she was. Her name was Betty. And she was a cook for Bowie. And she went out and fought with the men and was killed there. Her body was found between the two cannons. The Texans didn't want to report her, and the Mexicans didn't want to report her. They didn't want anybody to know they killed a woman. And the Texans didn't want to report her because she was black. And I'm saying, for God's sake, the woman fought and died there. You got to tell her man name.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so she's there, but I got a kick out of that. And, I listened to all this crap today. And again, I grew up in the Bronx with everybody. So I really had no prejudices. I grew up, I had a Puerto Rican neighborhood, a black neighborhood, an Italian neighborhood. I lived in an Irish Jewish neighborhood. There was German neighborhoods. I looked at neighborhoods like, what kind of food do they sell? God's honest truth. Lead me to a Jew deli and I'm really home.
Oh, God. Well, listen, you've told me about the various groups that you belong to, but one really struck out to me, and that's the Alamo Society. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how you're involved in that group?
Yeah, that group started up about 1985, and it's now called the Alamo Historical Society. They have a Facebook page under the name Alamo Society, and they're still going strong. In fact, they're getting bigger and bigger every day. And it's a group of guys that are interested in everything concerning the Alamo, from Alamo movies to Alamo memorabilia to Alamo research. They have a symposium once a year down in San Antonio, usually at the Menger or the Crockett Hotel or one of the things down there. And it's well attended. They're just a good bunch of people. They come in from all over the world. When I was down there, Nancy and I lived there for 10 or 11 years. And we got to meet people from England and from Denmark and from Australia. All people come to see the Alamo.
Yeah.
It's known worldwide.
Yep.
And we got to meet all sorts of people there, made friends, and that we still talk back and forth. I remember I met this one Welsh Sergeant Major from the British Army. Funny guy, very funny guy. And he had been down in the Falkland War,
Yeah.
So we had a lot to talk about.
I bet. Who were the people, Tom, that really influenced you and helped you learn the modeling skills that you have?
I really didn't have any people taught me anything. I have really learned it all on my own. When I started, I was only a kid. I built my first fort, I think I told you, in an alleyway, out of orange crates and stuff. And I just continued to make things better. I remember one time I found a vacant lot where a lead factory used to be, and I found these little rectangular pieces of lead, small pieces, and there were lots of them. And so I collected them, and I made a fort out of them, out of these little lead fort. But as I got older, you learn this, you learn that. I used when I built this one here, I used something called Jiffy Foam. I got it from a manufacturer out in Washington. Mm-hmm. And the Jiffy Foam, I ordered the thicknesses I wanted. If the wall was supposed to be 4 feet thick, well, okay, 4 feet and 54 millimeter is how much? Boom. Okay, I want so much in this thickness. And then my exterior wall's 2 feet thick. Okay, I want so much in this thickness. And, I just ordered it in bulk, and I'd get crates of it delivered here. And because I had bought 2 pieces off of out of a catalog, and they came in 2 pieces about this big, about the size of a page in a magazine or something. And I said, well, this stuff is great, but I need a lot. So I ordered a lot.
You know, one of the things that you told me that I found really, from a logistics standpoint, you built this magnificent thing, as huge as it is. It's in 4 segments, right?
Yeah.
And it had to be transported 1,700 miles.
Oh, yes.
And so you had to take the 4 pieces, load them in a truck or van or however you did it. And then you had to deliver them and then unload them and then put them together.
Yeah, we prayed a lot.
I bet you did, because the logistics of that would seem overwhelming to me.
Yeah, I was surprised, but they, the guy that you saw in the picture there, Chow, and another guy from there, Toby Hazlett, they led the group up here, and they brought museum movers with them. These guys were professionals on moving museum items. And they come up with their own truck. You know, they drove all the way up from Texas. And they had fun coming in here, you know. And they kind of laughed when they got here. They said, "You don't like neighbors, do you?" You know, looking around. You can't see anybody from here. And so they came in with the truck. And we spent an evening walking around a diorama and looking at it. And they were taking measurements and looking at where the joints were and the bolts that had to come out. And it was because of, you know, I had the lights on by that time, but it was getting dark. And so the following morning, they all showed up. I think there were like 6, 7, 8 guys, I think, had come up from San Antonio, some from Dallas. And they were very careful. They had built a, not a crate, but they had built something in the truck that they could slide each piece in on, one above the other, in the truck. And then they had some side pieces to hold them from shifting, I guess, you know, from side to side. And you can really turn this thing upside down and nothing will fall off. You know, those figures are in there. And what I did when I made it, each figure, I would drill a hole up through the, up to about the knee from the foot. And I used a heavy duty paper clip, and I would cut the paper clip piece about this big, and I shoved half of it up in that foot, and the other half would go down into the board, and I'd super glue the whole thing together. So when I put it down there, and just about 30 seconds later, I could leave it, and that wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
No matter what you did. That was another thing you'd have to find out. You know, you find that out by moving some things previously on dioramas, and they fall off.
That's part of your trial and error learning.
Yeah, trial and error. That's it. I was delivering some dioramas to a place in Gettysburg one time, and I got down there, and I forget how many I was supposed to deliver, 5 or 6. And I got them out, and I'm putting them down, and I grabbed this one, and I go, and I put it back. I could hear that it didn't make it, and I didn't want to open it in front of him.
You know, I'll tell you a funny story, man. I hate to break this up, but what you remind me of this. My son was getting married on a beach in Virginia Beach. And part of the ceremony, there was a glass bottle. I don't know what the symbolism was, but there was a glass bottle, and it was filled with different layers of different colored sand, you know, red, green, yellow, all the different colors. And so everybody was very carefully during the ceremony, you know, carefully moving this jar around. And at one point, my son handed this to the best man. And the best man was standing there, and he took it, and the first thing he did was go, chicka, 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 and the sand was all the sand was just one big pile of mess. It was just fun. And I was sitting there, I almost fell out of the chair. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen.
Oh, God.
My son's never forgiven me for that. Anyway, listen, let me ask you this. I ask this of everybody because I really think the answer to this is important. And I've learned a lot from people by their answers. When you're creating a model, now when you look at it, you stand back, you take a look at it. How do you know it's finished? How do you know it's time to stop and move on to something else?
That's a difficult question.
That scene right there.
Yeah.
How'd you know that was finished?
Well, everything that I could think of that belonged there is there. You know, from the artwork on the southern wall, from the blockages in the windows, the packs, and yeah, it's complete. It's got everything it needs.
Tom, when you look at that, is that a piece of art? Have you created a piece of art in that model?
I think so, yeah.
How important do you think art is in the stuff that you build, the scenes that you create, the dioramas that you create? How important do you think art really is in that?
Pretty important. You know, it's got to, you can't read that. The picture you've got up there now, write that in the book. You can't.
That's my point. That came out of your mind. That is creativity.
But it's information that that allowed me to create it. And the information, of course, is my researchers. And I had the best. Rick Range, Craig Kovner, Ed Dabrowski. These guys are top notch.
And they used original source. They didn't
they dug and got. Ed Dabrowski knows more about the guns that we used at the Alamo than anybody I know. Rick Range. He actually found one of the original Alamo cannons up here in Pennsylvania, brought it back and gave it to the Alamo. They had no idea where it had disappeared since the battle. And he found it. It was on somebody's lawn up here. It was a lawn decoration. That's how these guys, they just dig and dig and dig, and you can't tell them no. They just keep coming back until they get the right answer, you know, and they'll keep going for it. Craig Kovner. I remember Craig down there one time, and he was showing me the bullet holes in the door, and he says, "You see the angle this bullet hole came in at, you know, and you see this here. You see this here was cannon fire, and you can tell by the spray, and the they know this stuff. I don't, but they do." And when you get information like that, you say, okay, if this is there, it had to come from somewhere. Where did it come from? Okay, now I know there was a cannon back here, the 2-pounder. That could have easily been turned around once they left it. Unfortunately, they didn't spike any of the barrels. You know, when they left them, they just took off. Right. And allowed the Mexicans to reuse them, which was one of the reasons that was their argument with me on the cannons in the back of the chapel. In the front of the chapel, the main door had a V chunk taken out of the bottom of that part of the door. And they said that's because when they rolled the cannons in, they had to get that chunk out of there because of the wheel hub going through. I said no. I said that was probably just from a cannon firing at the door because they had to blow the barricade apart. But again, we had a disagreement. And I had to give in every once in a while. I hate to give in, but I did.
Listen, you finished this masterpiece, and it is a masterpiece in my opinion. I just can't say it enough. I can't congratulate you enough. The modeling and research that you've done and how you've built this, and every detail of it is just pure magic in my mind. I marvel at the detail, and I marvel at the modeling that went into building this. So what's next? At this stage of your life, you've done this. What's next? What are you going to build next?
Well, I was thinking of a rocking chair.
No, you're not, because you wouldn't sit in it that much.
I don't know. I don't think my eyesight is pretty well shot. I had operations on both eyes, but didn't do so good. I mean, when I painted faces, look at some of the faces on those Civil War guys.
Yeah.
When I painted faces, I could really get in there, and it looked good. But now I can barely see the head, to do the painting anymore. So that kind of ruins things for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to wait till the next life when I get new eyes.
There you go. I got you. Well, listen, we're drawing to a close here. It's been a real honor to be with you. I'll give you the final word. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, thank you for interviewing me on this. It's a pleasure to talk about my Alamo diorama. Not very many people do that. I appreciate yourself and all the people that work with you. And I just got to give credit to all the people that helped me build it. I mean, there's a lot of them, and they all deserve credit, for this. It's not just me. I built it, but not without their help. So that's about it.
Tom, it's been a true honor for me to meet you and be able to spend some time with you and hear you talk about something that obviously is really near and dear to your heart. I'll go back and say it again, to hear you talk about the Alamo and why it's important, and what those 189 people must have gone through in that 90 minutes. It's as if you were there and lived through every second of it. And to feel that way and then be able to create that the way that you've done in the scale that you have done is just a monument of modeling. I admire you for doing it so much, and just can't congratulate you enough. That is just true modeling at its very best, in my opinion. So thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. I know that you're going to continue to make some contributions to the hobby, because you're just too good a modeler just to sit there and rock and not keep talking about what your skills are and how you did things and what you've learned and the tricks that you know and so forth. Frankly, I'd love to be able just to sit in the rocking chair by you and listen to you by hours, talk about the tricks that you've learned and the hard lessons that you've learned trying to create the scenes and create the modeling atmosphere that you've created. And frankly, learn from you how to blend all of that knowledge into the art that I believe that you've created in your modeling.
I could sit for days and tell you how many times I had failures.
Hey, listen, I truly believe this. The only difference between a master and a novice is the master's made more mistakes.
That's for sure.
So I'm the novice and you're the master in this. I guarantee you, because you can't look at something like that and consider anything else. But I do want to thank you so much. And I wish you the very best. I'm sorry to hear about your eyes, because I think you're at your prime, and I'd love to see you build something next. But I do understand visual problems because I've got many of them myself. So,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Tom, thank you so very much for taking the time to be with us tonight. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I did, Jim. Love talking to you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Take care, buddy.
You too. Thanks, Tom. And thanks also to all of the YouTube viewers who have been with us this evening. I hope that you'll please subscribe to our YouTube channel, New Tracks Modeling, and also ring the bell, because then you'll get notices of all of our future shows. As you know, when we do these shows, the only way that you can watch them live is on our YouTube channel. And I hope that those of you that did watch this live enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed being with Tom this evening. Also, I hope you don't forget to subscribe to our website, which is www.newtracksmodeling.com. And if you do that, then you'll get links, login links to our Zoom shows that we do every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's a weekly show. It's all about model railroading and modeling in model railroading. We try to have mentors that help modelers build better. That's the purpose of the show. We're all about model building and mentoring. And last but not least, we have a Pinyon site now called New Tracks Modeling, where people can go and donate to help us defray the cost of producing these shows. All of our staff time and everything is done by volunteers. We don't have any salary expenses. It's all freely given because we really enjoy trying to do these shows for you. We hope that, again, that you'll consider donating to that. We also hope that those people that come and view this video, instead of passing up the opportunity to view some of the commercials, will also watch those commercials, because YouTube also gives us a little bit of money every time somebody watches one of the commercials on our video. So that's how we're going to try to finance the production of our shows and keep these going. And anything that we collect over and above the actual cost, we've created a system for what we call a New Tracks Mentoring Scholarship that's aimed at high school graduates who are pursuing a STEM program in a higher learning institution. And we think that that's a way of trying to continue the kind of modeling that people like Tom learn by themselves, because we believe that model railroaders are the kind of modelers that the country needs, that are valuable people for the STEM program, and possibly even to become a member of an organization that I represent as their ambassador to model railroading, the Professional Association of Model Builders. So with all of that said, we hope you'll support our shows, because we do think that they're important, and we do think that we have some fantastic guests on our shows. So thanks again for being here this time. Happy modeling to you until we meet again. Good evening.